Okay, YouTube. So this morning, if you watch my previous video, you'll have seen some of these messes, but I wanted to address them specifically in this one. And I'm going to give you some tips and tools on why your printer might have clogged or messed up, and what's the best route to fix it. So we're going to go through two printers here today. We've got two Crealities, the Ender 3 V2, which everyone obviously has, and the belt printer, very similar. Not many people have that one, but anyway, so came down from some prints, and you get this. You get just a big nasty blob. What do? Okay, so first, you're going to turn your temperature up of the nozzle. Turn it up above the temperature that you would normally print at, 220, something like that is good. And then you're going to want to move your Z up. So, give yourself some room. That's what we're going to do with this. So, maybe 180, go. Okay. So that's going to move up. And recommend grabbing some type of pliers. The little clippers will work, but those are a bit sharp. I'm trying to see where I put my proper pliers I'm looking for. This is what life at 3D Print Everything is. Where did I put the tools? Okay. So, now that you got the tools, if you don't know what these are welding pliers. I highly recommend them to every 3D printer user. They've got a really nice spring here, so it gives you a really nice spring like this. You got your wire cutter right there, so you can cut all your filament. That little deal there fits a nozzle perfectly. And then if you need to hold the heat block, you can hold it with this. These are also great for removing supports. And for a lot of the heat sinks, this fits a heat sink really well. So you get two of these, you can take apart an entire hot end, just about. You would only need an Allen to take off the wheels. So once the temperature is nice and heated up, we're gonna try to grab it and pull it down. So forgive me if the camera gets a little shaky here. I'm going to try to work through the camera. Yeah, see, so just kind of grab it and gradually go. You don't want to go too hard because you do have wires up in here. Okay, it looks like, yeah, it's going to successfully get the majority of that out. Okay. Yeah, see, that's not good. So we need to... Shit. Okay, so... is it? I'm just confused. I thought I saw the hot air. Oh no. Okay. Okay. I thought that was. Where is it? I thought that was a wire for a second. It does kind of look like one, doesn't it? But it's not. Okay. So now you've got a big messy. Oh crap. All right. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry. I'm sure that was disorienting as shit for everybody. Okay. So, the next two tools to clean up a nozzle will be tweezers and a set of these. So, we can come in here and you just kind of want to grab as much of this crap as you can. And see, this even has a silicone sock, so it straight up filled up all around that sock. Now I don't want to grab the sock with the sharp pliers, so see if we can grab the sock. Oh. Yeah, that's hot. Yeah, so just like this, you're just gonna have to kind of come in here and clean it out. And kind of what you do is you grab the plastic and push it up against the heat block, and that'll get it soft again to the point that you can then move it out of there. Okay, I think I'm gonna just take this off. Okay, so what do we need to take this off? It is 2 little Allens right there. So let's go grab our Allens. Now, why might this have happened? So I'm showing you how to fix it, but a lot of you came here for why. In this case, I'm not 100% sure. So this is obviously bed layer adhesion issue. In other words, this print came off the bed, and then it went to town, tearing everything up. So we didn't have a clogged nozzle on this one, but we did have a failed print. And just to reiterate, this is one of the reasons I don't like a Creality, is the wheels wear out. And even if you replace those with steel wheels, those will embed into the rail there. Okay, nice. So what do we have here? Yeah, so just not too bad. Not too bad at all. See? So we still got some junk right here. Look at that. It'll just come right out. Okay. A little bit of junk right there. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I gotta like look through the camera. Excellent. And look at that. Our heat block is still pretty clean. So even after having that massive ball of junk on there, look at how clean that block looks. I think that's a first for me, honestly. Most times you get something like that, you're gonna have a big dirty heat block afterwards. But that's also the importance of running one of those. Without this, that plastic probably would have got up all around your wires here and made removal a lot harder. So if that plastic gets up and around the wire and then hardens like that, then you have to take the wire with it, and then you got to rewire it or wire on new connections. So yeah, you can just kind of break all the plastic off here. But why would have this happened? Obviously, just it didn't stick to the bed. Well, let's talk about now the belt printer. Okay, so it's nice and clean. There's just one more piece in there I'm trying to get out. Oh, get out. There we go. Okay, cool. So we got that on there. So let's talk about this. What happened here? How do we get a bird's nest like this in the first place? So if you're looking at this and you're just like, I don't even know what happened. Well, what happened is, number one, your Bowden tube right here has, see if I can get it on video, right there, see it? So it's stripped right here out of this nut. So most likely what happened, the nozzle jammed. When that nozzle jammed, created a whole lot of pressure in this tube. So what's happening is this is pushing that filament, and it has to push it, and then it gets melted. Well, if it stops down here, it's now pushing, and it's getting shoved up in there. It's kind of like think of like a water hose. Water hose will flow water, and it'll just flow real nice, right? But what happens when you stick your thumb on the end of the water hose? That water hose balls up, starts getting real stiff and tight, and water starts spraying out of your hands really quick. Same exact thing happened here. Got a lot of pressure. It just popped out. Came here in the morning to maybe a tenth of the roll or something, just completely unspooled. So what do you do with this? I don't necessarily recommend trying to save this, only for the hassle's sake. If you only got 1 or 2 printers, it's quite probable that you could respool this on an empty spool maybe and still use it. I'd highly encourage that. But for me as production, I'm not going to try to save that, respool it, do anything. It's, I'll respool what I can, and the rest is just going to get trashed. But okay, why did the nozzle clog, right? What are some potential reasons for nozzles clogging? We'll go with material first. So on material aspects, if it's not your printer at all, there's nothing wrong with the printer. You could potentially have a blob in the filament, and that can either be just for 3 millimeters, it goes from 1.75 to 2.1, or it could be for 5-10 millimeters, it gets to 2. So it is possible that you can have a jam in the filament Now, it's important to catch those for multiple reasons. One, so that you know there's not an issue with your printer, because you don't want to chase a bunch of problems when it was just a bad roll of filament. Two, if you can catch it and take a good photo of it, it's always good to send that back to the manufacturer. And that's all the proof you need for another roll of filament. So if you get a blob and a roll of filament, no matter who you got it from, you should be able to return the entire roll and get a brand new roll, even though only a little bit was messed up from it. But for instances, like this printer, if I have one blob in this printer, it can screw up an $800 print. So I understand if, you're only printing, little 50-cent, 5-hour, 10-hour objects, and, it's no big deal if you get a blob here and the rest is fine. It can be a big deal if you're needing multiple rolls to run smoothly. Okay, so if it's not a filament issue, what else could it be? So generally what I see that it is going to be heat creep. So if it's not a clogged nozzle, it's what's known as heat creep. And heat creep is where the heat from the nozzle literally just creeps up and up and up the throat. Okay, so this is why we have a part cooling fan, is as this filament is coming down in here, it's up against, there's just metal back behind this, right? I mean, it looks just like this. So as this filament is coming down in here, this is all metal, hotness on, I forgot that's still hot actually. It's on, touching it. Yeah, so this gets hot, right? So, I mean, hot to the touch right there. So you want to cool this off, because you only want it hot right here. You want it hot right where it comes out of the nozzle, and that's where it's heating, that's where it's cooling. But that heat can go up, and if the heat goes up, what happens is your filament right here starts to get fat. And you have to make sure, if you're checking for filament issues, that if it got fat like right here and jammed, that could have been a heat creep issue, not necessarily a filament issue. So you've got to check for that. And this is going to look like, what'll generally happen is you try to push filament out, and you can either only get a little bit out, maybe you shove your little nozzle thing up there to try to clean it, the little needle, and you're only getting a little bit out. And if you pull it back out, maybe you put it back in, pull it back out, you do that a couple times, and you just can't, that it's just not flowing enough. You know what a good new nozzle feels like, and this just isn't doing that. It could be because you have some heat creep here, and it's softening that filament up right here, and then you're trying to push a bunch of soft filament, and it gets up. So this tube actually goes to about like right there or something. It's pretty far down here. So that tube has to be cool. It really needs to be as close to room temperature as you can get it, so that filament stays hard plastic, hard plastic, hard plastic, hard plastic, melted plastic. You don't want it creeping up there. So heat creep can cause that. And you'll get just kind of like a fatter, blobby, melted looking area right at the end of your tip if you're able to successfully move it out. Sometimes though, what'll happen is it'll get nice and fat in here, and then it won't travel back through this tube. And you go to pull it back up and it'll jam right here. And then you've now got another jam that you got to fix, and you'll either have to cut this and just make it shorter. Obviously it needs to be, we still got a little extra room here. I could probably lose that much, but ideally you would just get another one of these, and yeah. So heat creep is the other potential issue. Now, if it's not heat creep, what else could it be? It could be a clogged nozzle. Now, aside from jamming the system, a jam, what would cause a clogged nozzle? So clogged nozzles can come from a couple of different things, but one of the most common ones that I see and experience is when, let's say you don't have a fully level bed, and like maybe half of the print or something, this half is good, but this half, it's just completely squished, and you're not able to see the lines or anything. What's happening is when that nozzle is just pushed right up against this, and it can't get filament out, that filament is stuck right in here. I mean, this is pushing it, it's compressing it. You're now taking plastic and just melting it and then just squishing it. So it's kind of like compressing melted plastic, and that's essentially what you get. So you now got this nice hot compressed melt plastic, and if, you know, only maybe a little bit can get out, and that's where, you know, you're trying to deform the plastic. You're not trying to turn it into a liquid. And when you leave it in that nozzle and it stays in that tip, it can turn into a liquid, almost oily state. And I've seen that it's I don't know what it is in the plastic. I'm not a what's the right term for that? I don't know the molecular structure or the exact essentially. So what I know is PLA plus comes from corn. Corn gets made into plastic pellets, then we turn it into here. That's the high level. I don't understand why, when you leave plastic heated and in this area, that sometimes I'll see what looks like an oil coming out, and that oil gets really, really sticky and really hard. It's almost like a molasses or something like that. So that ends up happening though. That'll coat right down in here where your throat is. And then the plastic just can't move past that because you've now got this thick coating. Think of like your exhaust pipe, right? Like a brand new car, you got brand new pipes. But if you look at any car that's older than a year, especially cars that are several years old, if you look at that exhaust pipe, the inside of the exhaust pipe, what does it look like? Black, right? And if you were to take a knife and scrape it, you could probably scrape a little layer of carbon and shit off that exhaust pipe, right? Something similar kind of happens here, in that you just get buildup and it starts preventing that filament from coming out. And that can cause issues of, before the filament entirely jams, let's see if I have anything as a good representation. Yeah, maybe here. So you'll start to notice, you know, maybe stuff like this where it's missing just a little bit of the layer, right? So this, I believe this is a partially clogged nozzle that printed this. You know, so it still came out fairly good. I'd put this at a 90%, 95% acceptable. You know, not my best work, obviously, not the printer's best work, but it's not the best to show how it failed. I'm trying to think if I had any other. I just threw away one that looked like that. But yeah, kind of like this maybe. You know, you'll see stuff like this where it's just like, why is it missing that section? Now this was a setting, not necessarily this. This was a different mechanical issue, but when a clogged nozzle's happening, it'll be like from here up starts looking like this, and it might just be a big mess. So that's what it can look like. So yeah, so if the nozzle is having to move on a bed that is too far close to the nozzle, and it's jamming and preventing the filament from coming out, that filament staying in the nozzle heated can then cause you an issue. Now, what's another way of doing this? Say, just like what I'm doing now. I've got it warmed up. I've replaced all this stuff. There's still filament in here, right? I mean, this is just chilling right now with filament in here. It's not clogged, but that filament also, you know, so at least the oils and everything else is able to get heated and drip out through gravity. But I have seen too that when I've just left a printer like this, I go to then move the nozzle, whether it's heat creep or just the filament being in there too long, I get a clog out of it. So ideally, you don't want to, you know, warm up your printer and then walk away and forget about it, because that could end up causing you a clogged nozzle if you've got filament in there. So that's another way. Now there is still more. So another one to check, and this would be kind of like a very upfront one before you go into anything that we've talked to. Here's an easy one. One of the big ways that I see that these guys jam is because the nozzle is loose, okay? And it's important that when you're installing and changing nozzles that you do it hot, okay? Because this plastic, all right, when it's hot, obviously it melts, blah blah blah. If you when you go to change a nozzle, you need to heat this up, and then you want to take your plastic out, right? So let's say you don't take your plastic out and you don't heat it up, and you get your wrench and you force that thing off. So what's happening? I mean, you're literally going to break cold plastic on the inside in order to get that nozzle loose. Then you're going to take that nozzle out. When you put a new one in, you know, you're going to have cold plastic in the threads and on top of the nozzle and stuff like that. So what happens is you've got a nozzle that's, we'll just say my finger's a nozzle going up into this, and then you have your throat coming down into the heat block. So nozzle going into the heat block from below, throat going into the heat block from on top. So they have to mate and match each other perfectly, right? And what will happen is if you do it cold, might be a little bit of a gap, right? That plastic might be inside those threads and might prevent it from seating perfectly, right? And then what happens there is you'll get a similar blobby mess, but it won't be because the bed fell off. It'll be because it's coming out of up top here, it's coming out of just above the nozzle and just oozes all over this and then into your print. So that can be when a print looks like crap, or has failed like this too. It's potential that your stuff was just loose there and it wasn't mated up against each other. So when it's hot, that plastic will kind of act like what would I call it? I don't know, any type of penetrant or whatever. It's just going to be liquidy so that you can actually butt those up together. So do it hot. And I also recommend getting you one of these guys. There's different sizes. This is for the fat nozzle, and then there's one for the small nozzle. Yeah, I think I got it over there. So you'll take your little small nozzle tool and you can stick it in here and change this out. Now, the nice thing about the ender is your hot end is all fixed here, so you don't actually have to hold the heat block because you've got two little pieces holding it together. So you can just take this one-handed and undo your nozzle, put a new nozzle in. Otherwise, you'll have to hold the heat block and undo the nozzle. But yeah, so that's the reason why. So if that nozzle and that throat isn't up against each other like that, it could leak out, and it could also just, as it's going past that, if you have a little gap, that plastic's going to want to go in that gap. So let's say it's not leaking. Let's say for whatever reason it's a little loose, nozzle's in there, but it's not coming out. It'll still want to jam because that nozzle will get to, like, let's say the throat is right here and the nozzle's right here, and this plate is our gap, right? Like, as that plastic is coming through here, it's gonna like spread out. So now you've got plastic like this, even though it should be right here. You've got it on either side where it should be squished. And doing that, when then you go to, like, say, change filaments, you got to pull it out. Well, that fat side of that filament acts kind of like a wall screw, kind of like a drywall screw. You know how you put a drywall screw in and then it spreads out? It's the same exact thing in the nozzle. So if this goes down and there's a gap, it's going to spread out, and then now you've got filament that's like this instead of like this. When you try to pull it back out, you'll be lucky if it'll melt and come back up. So that can cause issues. Now, what do you do with that? And what's the easiest way to fix that? So the easiest way to potentially fix, let's say, a loose nozzle is to just tighten the damn nozzle. So tighten the nozzle down. If you realize you have a problem, push the filament through. If it still feels like it's unclogged, if it feels like the filament's coming out good, then you're good. And that's all you had to do was just tighten the nozzle. Let's say that it's not working, the nozzle's obviously clogged, you got a big mess here. Clean everything up, take your nozzle off, make sure your filament's out of it. And then what I generally do is, if you're going to clear a jam, especially if it's in a removing of the throat and clearing it, is take the nozzle off, shove filament through. So now a full line of filament will come out the bottom. Sometimes you have to push, and it'll pop that hoe out, and then you can cut it and then quickly pull it back, because this will be hot. And if you leave it for more than about 5 seconds, if even, that line that's dangling will hit that heat block and then melt and break off, and now you've got plastic up in your hot end. So it is a quickie thing in that you have to take the nozzle off, shove the filament through, cut it, pull the filament back out. Then you have a clean, cleared throat. You know that there's a good pathway to the nozzle, that nothing above the nozzle is going to jam it. Because I've had that happen where your nozzle jams, you replace the nozzle, and then it immediately jams again. And that's because the jam was just above the nozzle. So the nozzle did jam, but it was jammed at the bottom of the throat. So in order to clear that bottom of the throat, you got to push it through. So you got it clear after the nozzle's removed, cut it, replace it, and you'll be happy. So definitely there. Now in this case, circle back around. What do we got to do here? We got to replace this nut here, because there's little teeth that grab this. So what I'm probably going to do, take the nozzle out, purge it, make sure that it's good, replace that, put the line back in it, put new filament back in it, start it, and have it run again. So we'll figure out why decided to fail. It was doing production runs for me, so a little lame, but yeah, that's all you got to do on that one. And okay, another one. Why might this fail? I just thought of one more. So there are quite a few, but these are all legitimate reasons that I've run into and that you can easily test. You don't have to listen to everybody saying it's firmware and this and that and all this other stuff. You're getting a lot of conflicting information. Check these, because this stuff is mechanical. Okay, it's not firmware related. It's not the motors jammed up. Yeah, you know, I mean that. So, one other off-the-shelf one, what could it possibly be? You could possibly have a case where your motor might go bad. How do you check if a motor's bad? Well, any motor, if you'll take it off of its belt, so if we took this off, and like, you know, even if I just do this and I remove that, you know, you just need to twist the motor. So if you can rotate the motor and it feels, I would say fine, it feels like it doesn't have any resistance all the way around. You know, if you turn it, and now it's like, okay, and turn, that's bad. Okay, you need a uniform rotation of the motor. So it's possible that a motor could go bad. Also, if your cooling fan fails, so if the cooling fan breaks, and this is an often thing, when your cooling fan stops, it's going to stop cooling this, which allows heat creep to happen, which will then jam it. So it's a heat creep issue, and it's a problem we've already talked about. But if the cooling fan fails, it will cause that heat creep issue that we talked about earlier. Now, one other thing that wasn't a jam, but something that I'm experiencing on a couple machines. So these guys, this is a BMG dual gear. So what it does is it has two gears in there, and when it turns one, it'll turn the other. So this is supposed to give you really good bite of your filament, right? You're supposed to have, you know, it'll strip the filament before the printer doesn't move it. But what ended up happening? Let me show you. So I don't know. I've just noticed little things here. So this is slightly off, but still on topic. Okay, it's really hard for me to get you to see the effect, but what's happening is as I'm rotating this is going like this. It's going just a little bit, not that much. That's obviously enhanced a little, but it is moving just a little bit, and what that's doing is it's literally preventing the teeth from grabbing. So it'll grab for, you know, 3-4 rotations of a turn, then it won't. And you can literally just grab the filament and pull it right back out, and then it'll grab it again and it'll take it back down. But yeah, so that's not good. Now this is a brand new one, so hopefully this will replace the problem one. But another issue that I've seen, and I finally kind of figured it out, is that, anyways, those get a little off center, and it's the opposite of a jamming issue. You have a traction issue. It's not actually grabbing the filament appropriately and pulling it down. So that's the reason why I actually had to retire this printer for a bit. Is I had these 3D printed BMG gears, and that's not supposed to be it. There it is. So these are 3D printed, and they worked great for months. I mean, maybe even a year. But I started having the traction issues. I tried to adjust it, and all the changes I made only made it worse. And what I ended up doing, let's see here, was when I was making all these adjustments so I could push and get more pressure on the filament, but all it was doing was pushing this like away from the filament. And then when it pushed it away, there was no grab. So it's weird. It's been a little backwards intuitive for me on how to properly fix one of these, because I am very much a problem solver. I don't mind, looking at something broken and trying to figure out what went wrong with it or how to make it better. So this is my design right here. I designed this. We got a little dual color heat block, so 2 motors go on the outside, 2 BMGs in the middle. It's not the best setup, obviously, because these things have to sit right on top of each other. So whenever you get a jam, they're on top of each other like that, You have to literally remove the whole dual extruder assembly in order to undo a proper jam. But out of all the times I had this, out of all the running time this was, I never had it actually jam to a point that I needed to do that. I could unjam it all the other times, but I had a traction issue. So I've also I'll just do a video on that one later. But yeah, so that's all the reasons I can really think of that a jam would happen. The only other one I could think of would be flexible filament. And if you've got flexible filaments, and I'm going to use this in a direct drive sense, so because you shouldn't be printing flexible with a Bowden tube. You can get away with some of it, but what will happen is this flexible filament in between this gear and that throat right there, it'll like come over here, or it'll come over there, and it'll make a little nest inside here, and then eventually kind of get out, and it'll jam. And that's just because you're either printing too fast or whatever. But this tried shoving flexible filament through here, and it bound for either the nozzle not being hot enough or it moving too fast. But gravity has to pull that flexible filament through here, and you only need this to kind of pull it to then let gravity do its thing. So if you're trying to push flexible filament through here and not let gravity do it, it will generally bind up. Now there's different flexible filaments, so you can get a wet noodle flexible, or you can get like a car tire flexible. You know, there's a big difference between a wet noodle and rubbery tire, and that goes on a shore hardness scale. And if I remember right, the shore hardness scale, there's 3 scales. It's not really important what's the difference between them, but essentially it's numbered from, you know, 65 to like 95 or something like that. The higher numbers are the harder filaments. So I recommend getting a shore hardness in the 85 to 95 range, and you might even actually be able to print it off of a Bowden tube printer. But anything in the 75-65 range, you're even going to have trouble doing it off of this. That's where you got to really tune your printer to make sure that you can print wet noodle. But some of you know, rubbery ones, you know, they're borderline as stiff as PLA when you really print things. But yeah, you can play with those and buy different ones. But I think that's it. This video is long enough now. We went over a lot of different reasons why your nozzle might have jammed and how to fix it. If you think of a couple others that I might have missed, or any information I might have missed, feel free to comment below. If you've got an idea for a video, feel free to comment below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Post these videos in different groups. It helps out. But yeah, guys, thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.